and we saved, I think, £2,500 on not having a set behind them. And it just felt natural, and the conversations flew. It felt less corporate. It felt like you were kind of in a sitting room with these people. It was a proper fireside chat. So you saved money, you saved the environment. Happy days.
Welcome to the Impact Files podcast. I'm your host, Ned Wells, and I'm really pleased you're here. Welcome to another episode of the Impact Files podcast. And in this episode, we are delighted to be joined by Emma Wellstead, founder of Warwick Events and soon to be launched eventkind. Emma, welcome.
Thanks, Ned. Thanks for having me. Hi, Ali.
Hi.
Really nice to have you here. So let's start with an introduction to yourself, to Warwick Events and the work that you do.
Wow. Yeah. So I've got to summarize 51 years very quickly. Okay. So I probably would say that I got the bug for organising events at university. I've been in the event industry now for 27 years and set up Warwick Events 15 years ago. So Warwick Events is an event agency. And when I set it up, we only did events within a 50-mile radius of our office, which was then in Warwick, hence the name Warwick Events. And we were all about people, and we always are and always will be, and about connecting people to the place that they were having a meeting in, and having authentic emotional connections at meetings and events, because we felt that the event industry had moved into quite a sterile kind of supermarket environment, and we wanted to bring the farmers market kind of feel back, where you're meeting artisans and personalities and characters, rather than just kind of going through the same process like you would do in a supermarket. So I started Warwick Events, as I say, in 2010. And we became a B Corp in 2021. And sustainability kind of just runs through our veins. But doing the B Corp process probably just helped us in other areas of the business where we hadn't necessarily thought improvements could be made.
So was there a kind of moment where you realised that events were being done in a way that you didn't like, and you had a kind of idea? Was there a kind of light bulb moment, or did this kind of creep on you slowly?
I think that when I went to my first event in the corporate world, so I didn't do events for the first 2 years of my kind of working life, I couldn't believe I was sitting in a session which was more boring than school. And I was like, right, okay, so what, people expect us to sit here effectively for 3 hours and have this like kind of pathetic coffee break where there's this awkward kind of chitter chatter that is known as networking, and then we go back in again. And I think from that moment, really, Ned, I was battling against the bland and the boring, and just going, but there's so many different ways in which we can absorb this information, and that we can get together. And so yes. And then really, yeah, that began my kind of journey. And I've battled with a few bosses over my time who haven't necessarily shared my passion.
So did you come from an events management background and then realised they won't be doing well? Or were you doing another job and kind of went to an event and thought, oh, I can do this rather better?
So straight out of university, I actually went into a sales job.
Right.
So, and that's where I had two moments. I experienced events being in sales, and I had actually been my college board president and was also the entertainment rep for my college at university. So I remembered how much I enjoyed doing events and realized I had a husband at the time. He's quite different now. We've kind of swapped positions. He didn't see the need to take holiday.
Oh,
He loved his
okay.
job so much. He was like, I don't think I really need to take holiday. And I was in this sales job, and there were elements I really loved, but personality wise, it wasn't quite for me. And I thought, there must be a job that I would feel the same. And so I moved into the event industry, and I started off working for a medical marketing company in their events team. And that's how my journey into events started.
Okay. And then out of that, you were kind of realizing that you felt you could do it slightly better, more imaginatively, and then started
Yeah.
Warwick Events.
So what I was also finding is that, I mean, obviously over the years, it kind of built up until I wanted to break away and start Warwick Events in 2010. But what was frustrating was that you could go, and I'm talking kind of, you know, early 2000s, late 90s, you would go everywhere and it would be fusion food. Fusion was the thing at the time. And it's like, well, if I'm going to Italy, I want people to really feel that they're in Italy. I don't want a fusion menu. I don't want people to I want people to experience the culture, and I want people to meet people from that area. Whereas my experience in my early years in the event industry, I would arrive in a taxi, I would go into a hotel, the event would happen in the hotel, it would all get packed up, and we would, you know, we might have the occasional dinner out, but everything would happen either in a hotel or a conference center. And to be honest with you, Ned, you could be anywhere in the world.
Yeah. So we first met just over a year ago when you organised the B Corp festival, Louder Than Words, which I thought was, from a volunteer point of view, absolutely brilliant. I mean, it was so well organised, and the attention to detail that you thought about, you went way, way, way down into the detail and made it really fun for all the volunteers. And I think from a visitor point of view, or kind of delegate point of view, I think it went really smoothly. I think that my one recollection that people moaned about is the mobile phone signal in the middle of Oxford where the event was awful. I mean, it still is appalling, and that was the one wine which quite reasonably everybody had, which you had no control over at all. But are there other events or clients that you could mention that folks might have heard of?
Yeah, so we also did the 1,000 times better for B Lab, who, as you know, Ned, is the overarching certification kind of body of the B Corp certification. We've worked for Octopus Energy, the NFU Mutual, Avison Young, Hans Grohe, who are a bathroom manufacturer. Tend to work across all industries. So in that, I've got energy, I've got bathroom manufacturing, I've got finance, I've got like estate management. So we have a kind of a real array of clients. And I think clients are attracted to us from the way that we approach our events. And we fit really, really nicely with the personalities and the aim. I think the people that we attract want to do the best for the people that are coming to the event, which I think is really, really important. And going back to Louder Than Words kind of pushed us. It was like a 1,300 person event. But we used as you know, Ned, we used the whole of Oxford as our venue, which is
Yeah.
something that in the corporate world isn't really done. And we took the idea from the fringe festivals. So we take a lot of our ideas and inspiration from things that happen in the real world, as I would say, which
Mm.
doesn't seem to cross the barrier. There seems to be a barrier between what we do in real life and then what we do in business life. And we're trying to break down that barrier. And by having fringe, like the sessions happening in the theatre in the morning and then having a fringe session in the afternoon, meant that we could take the topics and put them in the right environment to create the right conversations, which is really super important when you're discussing something that's quite potentially sensitive. And you want to be in sofas, you want to be in a comfy environment. Yeah, we use the council's kind of chamber, which is like a mini House of Commons, to have debates, because you walk
Mm.
into the room and immediately you know you don't need to explain there's going to be a debate in here. The room says it. And I think that as organisers, you know, we have the ability to use these amazing places, and obviously by supporting all of these places, then where the money, which is always important to see where the money flows, is flowing into, universities, into the local authorities so that it can reinvest in the local community rather than necessarily the massive conference centres and hotels where they're sometimes it's fund managed. So yes, so
And
Louder
I
Than Words was quite different.
and I thought it was hugely original from a delicate point of view, and your fact that you used the whole of Oxford. You had folks running around the city centre, visiting all sorts of lovely cafes and venues and the town hall and the chaplaincy. And it made it really more kind of interesting as a couple of days out in a city,
Exactly.
which was brilliant. But when we were talking off air, you surprised me actually, because you said that you didn't get any new business out of Louder Than Words. And we were discussing how, I mean, I have had clients in the sort of IT support world, and I know that when your IT and a business is going well, nobody wants to think about it. And then when there's a problem, that's when there's a complaint. And you were saying that events is a little bit like that. When it's kind of successful, nobody particularly notices.
It's exactly like that, Ned. I think the event organizer is sometimes internally an internal team. Sometimes obviously they bring in experts. We're the experts they bring in, but I think also you are the unsung hero. No one necessarily knows that you organized the event. It's the client's name that kind of and obviously we're working for the client, and it's important for us, for the client to shine. So it's not about kind of stamping our name everywhere. We got some amazing thanks publicly on LinkedIn, etc., from B Lab. But as you said, we probably thought the phone might ring, but we didn't have the time. We were so stretched to make sure all those details were right, Ned, that by the time we'd finished the event, we were all absolutely shattered. So we probably didn't capitalize. And at the end of the day, Ned, we just love doing what we do. And we aren't a marketing, we're not a marketing company, we're an events company, and we're a strong events team. And so, yeah, perhaps we needed to seek some external help to get our message out there that we were the people that delivered quite a unique event. I mean, a very unique event for actually the UK, and a hugely successful event, and the largest gathering of B Corps in the world. I mean, it was pretty significant.
And having been running Warwick Events for a while now, in your particularly sort of what I think is a unique and interesting way, you have come across a lot of freelancers in your world and other events people, and came up with this interesting new offer called Eventkind. And I'd love to hand over to Ali to find out more about Eventkind.
Thanks, Ned. If I may, I'm just going to hop us back to a couple of points. I was listening all agog to that very interesting conversation, and there's a couple of pieces I'd like to follow up on just before we get to Eventkind. First one is about your own B Corp accreditation, Emma. So I'm interested in this. You're clearly not afraid of a logistical challenge, as that interesting discussion about Louder Than Words proves. That sounds immense, but B Corp in itself, getting that accreditation, that's quite a logistical challenge, isn't it? There are a lot of hoops to jump through.
And they're on fire, I'd say, Ali. Yeah. It's not just hoops; they're hoops that are on fire. They are very difficult to pass through.
Yeah. And I'm interested in your sort of thinking about going for that B Corp accreditation, particularly as you've talked a lot about people and people in place, which is something really interesting I'm going to reflect on more. But people, place, communications, and of course B Corp, it has people and a lot of the sort of social criteria to it, but it's also, of course, an environmental piece of certification. So I'm interested in what led you to apply and do your very hard work to get that. Yeah, let's start there.
So it was actually for an event that takes place. We were actually going to be working with an American agency who delivers something called the Skull Forum in Oxford. And I had a recommendation for a beer company for the drinks reception we were doing in the Ashmolean Museum, and they were called Toast. Toast take surplus bread, and they use the yeast in the surplus bread to create beer. So they're not purchasing yeast. So they're using a byproduct of bread making to create their beer, which obviously is an amazing idea and kind of mimics some of the strategies that we take to try and elongate either something's life or repurpose something. And on the bottom of Rob's footer was this B symbol. I clicked on it, and this is in lockdown, and I suddenly kind of felt, these are my people. This is people that also want to do good with their business. And until that point, I hadn't kind of discovered that there was anybody else out there who cared. And I our Warwick Events logo is actually the main thing. Warwick Events is quite small. It's we care. And we care about the people, we care about outcomes. And sometimes I feel I care more than my clients do, which, is no bad thing really, but sometimes a little frustrating. And that's, I sent it immediately to the rest of the team and said, look, I think we should do this. And we looked into it, and obviously the opportunity was a great time for us to then look at the rest of our business, because our business actually, we met so much of the criteria already, but there were things like we could change our bank account, we could be better with our bank, which we went in and changed. And we obviously sometimes hold client money, and we have Charity Bank, which is an amazing bank, enabling charities to borrow money, really low rates, and they also give great savings rates back. So it's all, I think with a lot of this, it can be a win-win situation, and people just aren't aware of it. So, and we recertified this year, just recently, moving our score up from 86 to 109.6. So we're
Wow.
still making progress. And I think what it did, Ali, is the framework, the initial framework, I'm not so clear on the new standards just yet, but it helped us look at perhaps our events and how we approach events was good, but there were the other areas of our business where we perhaps were maybe like clients are with events, just hadn't really thought about it. I mean, naively, we all just filled up our bins in the 70s and 80s and thought the fairies took it away. I don't really know what we thought. Looking back, it's kind of crazy. And I think you have all these light bulb moments, don't you, where you're like, right, okay, well, if I can change my bank, and then, and again, it's money flow, isn't it? If I'm giving money to a bank who is ethically investing, then it changes the course of things. So that's how our B Corp journey started, and that's where we are today with it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Ned, you had a follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reflecting on what you said, Emma. Somebody said to me, it was a kind of light bulb moment a couple of years ago now. They said, be careful when you throw things away, because there is no away. I'm like, oh. Ali, over to you in a sec, but I think this is going to go really neatly into the section on the events industry and waste and sustainability, and maybe we come on to eventkind after that. Would that kind of work for you?
Makes sense. Yes.
Cool.
Let's talk about that a bit. So the events industry and where it stands currently in relation to sustainability considerations and indeed waste management. So I wonder if perhaps we could start by you giving us your snapshot of how you think the events industry squares up in those areas.
Well, before coming and joining you today, I delved in and did a little bit of research, because I think before we start this conversation, we have to realize how big is the event industry. So I'm only focusing here on business events as opposed to festivals, etc., which I don't have. I'm a corporate event girl, so I don't have as much knowledge on outdoor events, festivals, and obviously that the industry is massive. But as far as business events, UK events in 2023 generated just over 61 billion.
Wow.
And the only stats that I can pick up were from 2018, which obviously is pre-pandemic, is that on average in the UK, 370 events take place every day. Now, those events can be anything from an exhibition to team building to an internal event, and to obviously people might be like, well, that's pre-pandemic, but the the revenue generated by the industry is now matching, or if not surpassing. So we can only kind of infer slightly that those figures are roughly the same. There might be a little bit of a difference, but you're looking at masses of events taking place in the UK every single day. I would say that perhaps on the higher end of the events, led by some very large corporates, that waste management and sustainability is being considered. I think, and personally, from my knowledge, I don't think sustainability is generally considered at all in the current UK event industry. I think it's a little bit like going on holiday and you recycle at home, but when you go on holiday, go
Oh.
into an Airbnb, I'm not like this because sustainability, but I think for most people, you go on holiday from your habits that are good habits, and events fall into that same camp. Nobody questions where the lanyards go. Nobody questions why they're buying the merchandise and where merchandise goes, especially kind of the need for gifts. And nobody really thinks about, well, what's that set that we're building? What elements of it are going to be recycled afterwards? What elements of it can be repurposed? If you go to an AV company, a production company, they are just keen to say, and we can brand it for you in your colors.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting because as you were saying or implying there, events historically, they've been a lot of events. It's been about stuff. It's been about freebies and, as you say, the little add-ons that people expect to come away with or certainly used to expect to come away with. I don't know, a pen, a plastic thing, a whatever it may be. And is that still the case? Have expectations changed? But by the sound of what you're saying, maybe not yet.
Again, it's a personal opinion. I went to the Meeting Show this year, which is one of our UK leading exhibitions, and I was disappointed to see walking around the stands, seeing the carpets on the floor that, and they might be being recycled, but were they needed recycling isn't the answer. There's still energy required to recycle. There needs still to be a purpose. What does that recycling go into? And yeah, I think that there's a lot where we have to stop and refuse and change the way we expect things to look. And it goes back to my initial kind of comment, is drop the ego a little bit. Drop the branding ego. If you're having a company event, is it really necessary to recarpet somewhere in your company colors? Because surely it should be an emotional connection you have with that company, and a pride and an understanding that that you don't have to walk into something that's been converted to make it look like effectively your office building. I just don't understand why there still isn't a celebration of place and a celebration of difference. So back to your question on waste, again, I feel that there are, even if you're doing an event, they go with your sustainable compostable materials and your bamboo cutlery, etc., thinking it's sustainable, but actually a real fork that gets washed and used again and washed and used again is a much better option. So I think there's also this feeling of creating an event that feels sustainable, but unless you're engaging with your catering team and the vegware is going into industrial composting, it's just going to landfill. And I think maybe many people don't realize that. So when you come to an event and it's like, oh, look at me and my bamboo. The bamboo cutlery is still single use. Might not be made of plastic, but it's still being manufactured. And will still, even if it's being composted, requires energy, whereas a fork can just be washed up and put back in the drawer, used again.
One of the reflections I have on this, Emma, and I think your comment about it's a bit like when you go on holiday, you kind of leave a lot of your sustainability values, or some people leave their sustainability values at home. One of my reflections on the events industry is that the people that I know that are kind of respected in it at a kind of hands-on level are people who are very efficient and very quick and very able and very organized. And part of that can be, throw this away really quickly, move on to the next thing. I know where my new stuff is. I'm going to go and grab it, throw all the old stuff away into wherever it is. And that kind of, does that resonate with you? Am I sort of,
Yeah.
do you kind of recognize this, that there are people that are very efficient, very quick and very good and very organized, but they're not necessarily thinking about how can we reuse all the things that we're responsible for?
I think the event industry is works at such a high pace, and the people within the
Mm.
industry are under so much pressure, juggling so much. They don't have the time and resource to look for something else, and they're stuck, and they want to be better. I think that, if you interviewed people, people would love to be better, but they just don't know how to, and they don't have the time to think about how to. And as you just said, they are organized and they are having a lot of pressure put onto them. And if you can buy and your budget's low and you can buy a load of stuff off Amazon to theme an event, then you'll just default to that.
That's such a key point, isn't it, about the budget? Because, yeah, quite often this stuff is going to be cheaper, right? Or certainly cheaper in the immediate term. There's perhaps a different model or set of models which need to be considered here. And perhaps the industry isn't, it sounds like the industry isn't quite there yet. And I mean, I'm thinking if there's a rental model, and come back to your example of whether it's carpets, maybe that's not the best example for rental, but if there's a rental model that could work, there's, as well as the budgetary constraints for the event organisers or the clients, I guess there's a battle, or perhaps a set of battles to be won with the manufacturers or the providers of the products or the infrastructure. So it sounds like there's quite a few shifts needed.
There's a lot of shifts needed.
Mm.
And it does go back to events don't fall under any criteria necessarily for, reporting on. Again, that is varies, but for instance, we've got a number of clients that we produce kind of a very overview sustainability report. They use us obviously because we are certified, but they're not asking us for any information. They're not asking us for any carbon capture. So I think that I would say that probably in 70 to 80% of the event industry, because 70 to 80 will be smaller, lower budget events, nothing is happening and it's still being organized in exactly the same way. I mean, here's a great example really of a really simple change that again, people probably don't even think about. There was a move in the kind of the early 2000s, late 90s to go to cabaret style. So cabaret style, for people who don't know, obviously is a round table and you kind of are in a horseshoe around it. And it's a default ask now. Oh, we like it in cabaret style. Every single table has to have a tablecloth on it. All those tablecloths need to be washed, laundered. So what is the difference between cabaret style, which actually puts you with a physical barrier and distance between you and the speaker, versus theatre? And it just became a trend. And I think sometimes now the industry needs to kind of step back and go, well, what's the purpose of the event? And do we need cabaret? Are we going to break out then and do a team table thing where we need a table? Or are we just in cabaret for the sake that it's cabaret and we've always done it in cabaret? So there's a lot to kind of step back from and rethink. There's a lot of copy and paste that happens. And again, that's a time factor and a pressure factor.
Just rewinding a quick sec. I mean, you said that your clients are choosing you because you're certified. Does that mean that they're choosing you because of your B Corp certification?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Oh,
Yeah.
so that's working.
Yeah. So they choose us because they know that their event will be more sustainable with us. They don't know how to do a sustainable event, but
Go on.
they know. Yeah. And they also, I think if you speak to any of our clients, they've been educated by us, in the, you can choose this or you can choose that. So a classic example was we actually did an event at the Institute of Directors, and it's a very, very ornate room. And my client wanted to put a stage in with a backdrop, and it was kind of panel discussion mainly happening, but the colors of the room were greens and golds, and it was beautiful. And their branding is orange and black. So immediately there was a big jar. And I said, and what they wanted, the conversation level was, they're a high security company. So the people coming along were quite significant kind of places that need high security. So the conversations that they wanted to establish and the feel they wanted was a feeling of openness. So I said, well, then sticking a big brand in the middle, not only, you know, it's got an environmental cost to it, but it has a cost to it. And actually, if you want to create this friendly, open environment, don't jar with the room. Use the room just as a backdrop and have the stage in the middle. So we kind of moved the stage from kind of long ways where people would have been a long way away from the speaker, curved the seating around, and actually just had a low level stage. We brought down some orange bucket chairs from their company for them to sit on to get a little flash of orange in there. Then they came down with some of the guys coming down. And we saved, I think, £2,500 on not having a set behind them. And it just felt natural. And the conversations flew. It felt less corporate. It felt like you were kind of in a sitting room with these people. It was a proper fireside chat. So you saved money, you saved the environment. Happy days.
That's a lovely example of your sustainability thinking, as you say, saving money and saving the environment.
Yeah, it wasn't needed. It was a
It's a double
refuse.
win.
Start with the refuse.
I'd love to move the conversation on to the broader role of communications in your sector, because so much of what we've been talking about so far has been about kind of education's not quite the right word, but it's people in the events sector knowing that there are options and knowing there are other ways of doing it that will be equally efficient and quick and professional and high quality, but actually more sustainable. And with your lovely last example, more financially efficient as well. So perhaps we could touch on that. And I think that definitely brings us on to your solution at Warwick Events for providing an interface and a community and somewhere to meet for the many, many, many smaller businesses in the sector and self-employed.
Yeah, so I think that I still have huge frustration going to events and seeing how things haven't changed. And there's a lot of people that are driving policy change, and there has to be policy change. I mean, a great example of that is our carrier bags, isn't it? There was a change and there was a cost put on that. And so now we all feel that we feel a bit bad. Oh, I haven't got my carrier bag. So don't get me wrong, policy change is really important. Love to see a bit of a policy change on lanyards, really. But anyway, that's another story. But what we realised, probably, Ned, as you've just said, it's generally always small teams. It's a small internal corporate events team. It is an event agency. Now, there are large event agencies, but even if you work for a large event agency, you're still potentially in kind of like a smaller team working with specific clients. So it is always relatively small, or you're freelance, or you work for an association and you're just the only events person. And often there is only one event person, or it's an EA or a marketing manager, and that's part of their role. So it's not even their full-time role. So when they start to come to an event, they don't even have kind of the experience and knowledge that an event person that's doing it all the time. So we took a step back and is that we hold a lot of knowledge, and we've generated a whole new idea, which is a community to be able to come together and share best practice. At the end of the day, where we're going with the economy at the moment is marketing budgets are shrinking. And if events aren't delivering, then our slice of the pie is becoming smaller because the pie is becoming smaller, but could become even smaller if we're not delivering great events. And great events, sustainability wise, going back to my initial conversation, is also about time. When you take 100 people out of a business to have a day's conference, that's a huge, no one really factors in the money and the cost of those people not doing their day jobs. So the purpose of an event, of getting people together, is super, super important. And much can be done so that you have perhaps the CEO giving a briefing on a short video before you come to the event, so that you make the most of that time that you've got these amazing brains together and conversations and magic happening. So we realized that people were stuck in the copy paste, and people also don't have time. So the idea behind eventkind is that it's an online platform, but there's 3 areas. There's share, and that's where you share your top tips, but it's quick, fast, bite-sized stuff so that people can absorb it really quickly. And it might be the way that you've done an event. It might be so it might be a format change. It could be a recommendation of a supplier. So many different kind of things. Then we have ask. So you can ask the whole community, I've got this challenge. Can somebody kind of, help me? Or I'm looking for a supplier that does this. I want to change the way I realize that this isn't very sustainable. Has anyone got any ideas? And then there's a chat. So just general kind of community stuff. And then we have on a weekly basis what we call event, which is an eventkind vent, where you can just come along, and if you've got a challenge, it's a half an hour kind of, the community, different people in the community come every week, and they just, yeah, share their challenges, share their frustrations. It's done under Chatham House rules, so you can kind of talk about your clients in a protected way. Because often, sometimes, you are also trying to bring around stakeholders, and the community can help you with, well, the client's not buying in. How, I don't understand how to reframe it to them anymore. So you can get other people's perspectives and ideas in. And we also do an educational piece once a month where we focus on an area of the industry, and it's a 20-minute kind of content and then 20-minute Q&A. So it's a lunch and learn. And we launched it to a small group of founding members in September, and we will be launching it to the world as of January. And we hope it will help break down the silos, because a lone wolf doesn't survive, but a pack can. And I think it's time the event industry started to come together and share.
One of the things you mentioned when we were talking off air, Emma, which I want to make sure we include here because I thought it was so interesting, and I suspect might be part of the sort of educational side of what you're doing with eventkind. But you were talking about using local suppliers, and perhaps you could just tell us again why it's so important to use local suppliers in your view in the events industry.
So local suppliers know their area really, really well. So they're not caught out by traffic or, just general stuff that happens in the local area. They generally know the venues pretty well as well, and the quirks and the problems that a venue might throw up, and the unloading, and et cetera, et cetera. But also they don't travel very far. So if you can use local and if you can use independent, that's what we always try and do. Every event we do, we try to use suppliers that are within a maximum of a 50-mile radius. But if I'm organising an event down in London, I don't know the London people. So by asking the eventkind community, if I'm looking for something specific, and someone who's based down in London can give me a recommendation, and let's face it, recommendations and word of mouth is like the best. But my absolute dream, and I came across this, and I think this is something we should apply to so many things, is that there was a province in China who were looking at town planning. And they decided to have half of the group representing 3 generations in the future. So that any decision for planning, they were positioning themselves and representing the generations of the future to argue, but that will cause this, that will cause that. So they were looking at it in the future. At the moment, I could imagine describing to somebody when we're probably in more dire times than we are now, that we used to go in the olden days to a hotel, a large hotel, let's say it's a large event for 1,000 people. We would set up the stage set and we would brand it all. And then we would have our meeting for 2 days and we would tear it all down, and another company would come in and they would set up effectively exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then they would tear it down after their 1-day meeting. And in that week, you might see 2 or 3 big events coming in with the lorry loads of stuff. But if, and maybe this is the 10 years time that I would like to see, if maybe the venue or the hotel could start linking people together and saying, well, actually, we've got a group coming in straight after you, and it looks like their setups is really similar. So why don't we look at cost sharing, and why don't we look at using the same elements and branding with lighting? We can put a gobo up with their brand on it. It doesn't need to be in print. We can use light, we can use, screens, so that one day it's, let's say, I don't know, the Body Shop, and the next day it's a finance company.
And I think the interesting kind of communications challenge there is that clearly makes sense from a sustainability point of view. How do you craft that in a way that is appealing to the clients who are used to behaving in a particular way and have their processes and all the rest of it? And clearly this makes financial sense all round, as well as sustainability sense. And it's more about breaking the habit and kind of managing the risk of someone having to do something in a slightly different way.
I think that we need to demonstrate it works.
Yeah.
And I think that if through our community we can start to get someone to back their events from different companies, I think that's the proof. And then perhaps once a venue starts to see that it does work, and that, and ultimately, does that mean for a venue that venue can be afforded then, because the production budget is decreased, because there's cost savings from the back-to-back nature of the event, especially when you're creating an event in like a festival setting, where you're bringing everything in. So, I mean, one of our clients at one of our eventkind community at the moment is looking as to, because he is doing about 1,200 people celebration of, I think it's 10 years of their business, but he is approaching smaller festivals to see if he could tag on to the end, because the infrastructure is there already.
Oh, interesting.
So that was one of our suggestions to kind of in the community that you could look at doing.
Really interesting.
But again, just because something's built for the public doesn't mean that a corporate couldn't use it. We just got to get smarter, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And just following on from that, it's interesting hearing about how you've conceptualized eventkind and those different areas of activity you've got there with the share and the chat and the ask. So I can see that it's surely going to be such a supportive network for professionals like you and other events bodies. Do you see eventkind as potentially having a lobbying role or an externally facing role, where you as a coherent community can start to push for some of the change you've been talking about? You mentioned lanyards, for example. Do you see yourselves as having that lobbying role in future?
I really hope so, because I think that we can represent the community voice. I think the difficulty sometimes is that eventkind is full of people that are doers. They're not the directors. They're the grassroots level. They're the people that have to try and make an event happen. And I think that if we can represent the voice of the doers, that would be an honor and a privilege, to be honest. And we are giving people who are overworked and given very difficult budgets, budgets get signed off, they get handed down to the logistics team to do.
Yeah.
And it can be a really big challenge. So if we can represent the voice of the people that are doing in the industry, then that would be amazing. That would be
Mm.
a really big success from it.
Yeah, that is interesting. So do you think potentially whether it's lobbying the appropriate ministers in government or it's local councils or any and all, you think there's some potential for that?
I do think there's potential, but I also think there's potential for temperature checks to be given effectively from that. If the community grows to the size that we'd like it to grow to, that we can actually ask the community,
Mm.
honest questions. How many of you do this currently? And we can also see where progress can perhaps be made within the industry more easily by understanding how many people are actually doing these things. Because no one ever asks the doers.
Yeah, that's such a key point, isn't it? It's
You've
really
got to
important.
you got to start. Just so I really believe change happens if we can give ideas and alternatives to the people that are booking and doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And some people have said to me, "Oh, but if we've got a really good idea, then do we want to give it to our competition?" But I really probably my big analogy on this one is the emperor penguin. They huddle together the to keep their
Mm.
eggs warm. They all come together. At the end of the day, they've all got an egg that they want to hatch into their offspring and then when they go into the water after that bleak winter, it's every penguin for himself.
Yeah,
There's still there's still the whales out there, that the killer whales out there still trying to get you. Um and it is every penguin for himself, but they've come together to be strong and to survive elements. And I just feel that we are a very siloed industry. And if we can start to come together, and there's a lot of loneliness in the industry as well, a lot of
mm,
overworked people. And if we can also reach out to people and help them feel that everyone else is going through it, that they are part of a community, and also to get a sense, we put polls and questions out so that people go, everyone else feels the same as me at the moment. Oh, that's
yeah.
great. Business is hard. It's not just me. It's not just, especially when it's a small business and you've got no sense of what's going on in the rest of the country.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And thinking about, the theme we're also interested in terms of sustainability, it's a struggle to kind of hit those targets you want to in terms of sustainability for the planet if you don't have a sustainable group of people in that people are burning out. And as you say, they work in small groups and they feel unsupported. So first you need to build that strength, that resilience, that sustainability in your community.
It's just a simple question. And, we don't always think about it when we go to a restaurant. So going back to going on holiday, if you're eating a chocolate brownie, where did the cocoa come from? So if it's on a menu and you're serving it to 100 people, where did the cocoa come from? And if
Mhm.
everyone starts asking, where did the cocoa come from? Is it fair trade? Then we start to create a shift. The hotels go, well, all these event organizers, they just keep asking, well, we're going to have to change our supplier. Changes can be that. And with 370 events happening every year, how much cocoa are we using that's not fair trade?
Yeah.
Because we don't, we're very good on dietaries, but we're not asking the questions where things come from.
Yes, those ethical sourcing questions or responsible sourcing. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I'm sure that there is a great group of people out there that are doing that, but for some people it hasn't even crossed their mind. They
Sure.
don't think about flower farms when they order flowers from a florist.
Yeah. Makes
So
sense.
don't even know that that's like a thing.
Right. Okay. So sort of following on from all of that, I think I could answer the question myself as to where you'd hope to see the business or the events industry evolving over the next 12 months. What do you think realistically? Where do you think you might be in 12 months?
In 12 months. Oh, goodness. So I would love to see the event kind, like people knowing of event kind, so that they know there's a community out there that can support them and join them. And we will do everything we can to wave our flag and encourage people to come our way. And we will continue kind of doing our events with Warwick Events as they kind of are, really. All of our main effort is going to be going into developing the community.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Emma. We've covered so much ground. It's been really fascinating, and I think over the course of our chat, you've mentioned quite a lot about where you hope the sector will be in maybe 10 years' time. But is there a kind of summary view that you can maybe give our listeners?
I just hope that there's two things that I really hope that people in our industry start to do, and that's focus on people, not the presenters. Focus on what people are going to get out of a meeting and start with that, not with what you want to tell. What do people want to hear? So I hope that there's a shift and a respect for the people that are coming, and also some good thought about the personalities arriving into that space, and making sure that the content and the format of the event suits different personalities, and that we don't treat everybody in the same way, because we are all different. And you take a salesperson and an accountant, personalities, it's being very stereotypical, but a salesperson generally is more gregarious and an accountant is slightly more reserved, and asking them to do the same team challenge sometimes can be jarring, and it doesn't actually make a team come together. It just highlights the annoying things that salespeople do and the quiet, reserved nature of the accounting people. So stop, pause, question, and think about where things come from, and think about where things are going to go in anything that's purchased. And then probably the final question, I really wish people would think about following the money.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you ultimately paying? Is it going into the local community, or is it actually going... Is it going not? Is it going overseas even, to some investment fund that owns a property? Because if we can direct the money into local communities, it starts to make a real difference, rather than perhaps just paying big dividends to people that aren't even needing those dividends.
Now, my last question is typically asking you for one piece of advice for businesses in the events sector pursuing sustainability and financial objectives. However, I'm going to answer that because I think the answer is join eventkind.
Yeah.
Now, cheeky question that you may not be prepared for, and I hope this is okay, is do you have the financial model for eventkind? Is there a charging structure that you could talk about, that you could share?
Yeah, we want to keep it really affordable because we want the community to grow. So it will be £200 for the year. That I mentioned with share, we do, from Warwick Events, have years and years of experience. We share out a minimum of 3 kind of bite-sized learning tips a week. So there is, throughout the year, over 100 kind of money saving good ideas that are going out, as well as our learning sessions. So we hope that people feel, obviously it's £200 plus VAT, that it's value for money. So including VAT, it's only £20 a month, because we want the people to come, but we obviously do have to make sure that we can sustain it.
Sure.
Hence that there has to be a price element to it.
Emma, that's fantastic. And how can people find out more about you and find out more about Warwick Events and more about eventkind?
So people can email me at emma@warwickevents.co.uk, or emma@eventkind.org. If anyone wants to have a look at eventkind, if they go on to eventkind.org, that will give them the information that they need. We are actually running kind of a free period that will end at the end of December, and as of January it will become paid, but it will be we'll be also offering a 14-day free trial, because we believe anyone that comes onto it and once they're trialing it will love it and will stay. And then people can call me. I'm an old-fashioned girl. I'm quite happy, as you can hear, I'm quite happy to chat. So if people wanted a call and kind of get on board or support us in any way, it's 07711 389 490. And as I say, I'm really happy to chat to people and tell them anything more that might be able to help them. We've just got to collaborate. It's the only way forward, I think.
Well, that's fantastic. That's been such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Emma, for joining us.
Well, thanks to you and Ali for listening to me and inviting me along. Yeah, it's really been so much fun.
I think we've learned a lot, and it's exciting thinking you're on the cusp of the full launch of Eventkind. It just sounds such a great idea, and people are going to love it.
Having been a doer for a long time, I would have loved it. And I think if you create something that you would have needed, then that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share it with your colleagues. For more about the podcast, about us, our marketing services, and our wider support for purpose-led organisations, please visit our website at theimpactfiles.co.uk.